Who's familiar with the movie Christine? Came out back in 1983. It was like a scary horror movie about that teenager who was in love with his car and the car was possessed and killed people. Now, at the end of the movie, the teenager Arnie is killed and the car starts playing a song called Pledging My Love by Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace, man, they call him the king of R&B in his time alive back in the 1950s. And he's considered R&B and rock and roll first tragedy. He died way before the 1959 plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. And I say that he's considered R&B and rock and roll first tragedy because rock and roll music actually emerged from the influences of rhythm and blues music, R&B. Johnny Ace was one of the first artists to make that transition. But see, the thing about Johnny Ace, he was only a popular musician for only about 4 years. And he only made 21 songs in his lifetime before he died at the age of only 25 years old. He was what you call a crooner, one of them type of singers. He had that mellow baritone type of voice. And it's a shame he's not even inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the R&B Hall of Fame. And you can barely find anything about him because he never gave an interview, he never performed on television or had any film footage of him. So, let's get into this story, right? Now, Johnny Ace's birth name is John Marshall Alexander Jr., and he was born on June 9th, 1929 in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the sixth child born of 11 children from his parents. Now, his parents, very religious people, very religious and strict. His father was from Mississippi, and he was a laborer. Plus, he was a Baptist preacher, and he would preach at a couple churches. And his mother was from Arkansas. Now, the family was poor, but they did have a toilet inside their home, which was a big deal at that time because everybody else who had homes at that time had to use the bathroom outside. But, ever since he was young, he always liked to play jokes, prank, horse playing, wrestling, and everything. And he did start it off singing in church. He was gifted and could play the piano by ear. Now, his parents, like I said, very strict religious. They didn't allow no other type of music to be played in the house but spiritual gospel music. But once they left the house to go to work or run errands, Johnny would play R&B and blues for the siblings in the house. Now, by the time he got to high school, that's when people started to notice his musical skills. But he got in trouble a lot because he would never go to class. He always would sneak into the music band room and play the instruments. He loved playing the piano. And it was a teacher named Nat D. Williams who tried to get him to take lessons on music, but Johnny just wasn't interested. He didn't want to learn how to read music because he already was God gifted with the talent of playing by ear. Any instrument. He'd pick up any instrument and he would just teach himself how to play it. Saxophone, the organ, you name it. And by the 11th grade, he ended up dropping out of school and he joined the Navy. He figured if he joined the Navy, he can get out of Memphis and travel the world. Now, his parents was upset, but they looked at it like maybe the military is good for him and it would help him get his life together. And when he had joined the Navy, the Korean War was going on. But the military is where he developed a love for guns. Once they showed him how to handle a gun, he became fascinated with firearms. But by being in the Navy, it just never interested him. The only thing he really saw at that time was how racist the military was to the black sailors. You got to remember, this was like 2 years after World War II. They'll make the black sailors on the ships do all the cleaning and the cooking. That was their job at that time. But Johnny, he wasn't going for none of that. He was different. He had his own plans. Look, the MPs, the military police, always had to go looking for him because everywhere they would dock, he would hit the clubs and would try to perform playing the piano. He was AWOL, and he ended up getting kicked out of the military because they could never find him. He wasn't even in the Navy, a year before he got kicked out. So once he got kicked out of the Navy, he went back to Tennessee and he just focused on being a musician and making it big in the music industry. But then him and one of his friends ended up getting locked up in Mississippi for some stolen scrap metal. Now, the crazy thing at that time about jail was, right, they could leave jail and be free. They can leave jail, be free all day, but they had to come back at night to serve their time. Johnny and his friend was serving a couple months at that time, and he had asked his dad, could he bring him a guitar? And his dad had brought him a guitar, and that's when him and his friend used to perform on a corner, and people used to give them money. And once he finished his jail time in Mississippi, he went back to Memphis and joined a local band. Then he ended up getting married and had a son and a daughter, but he was never there for his family though. He was a ladies' man. He had a lot of women. It's crazy because his mother, Johnny Ace's mother, was so disappointed in him that she let his wife stay there with the kids, but she didn't let Johnny stay in the house because he didn't have a job, for one. And plus, the biggest thing she didn't let him stay in the house was because he was playing that devil's music, which was R&B music. Wow, that's crazy. So he didn't have nowhere to go to stay. His wife and the kids stayed in the house at his mother's house, but he couldn't stay there. So he would just be out in the streets all day, all night. So then he started hanging out on Beale Street, in which some say was the birthplace of the blues. Beale Street was the place all the black people would hang out and hear music. It was like Harlem. And hey, they say Elvis Presley used to go there too to hear the black music when he was coming up. So, once Johnny started hanging out on Beale Street, that's when he ended up meeting legendary blues guitarist B.B. King. Because at that time, B.B. King was putting his own band together. And the first person he recruited was Johnny Ace as his piano player. Now, back then, people used to be scared to play with B.B. King because he was so talented and good. And he really didn't need a band. But Johnny Ace was his first choice to join his band. He also recruited some other legendary blues people like Bobby Blue Bland. Bobby Blue Bland was the vocalist. Then he had Willie Nix on drums. Adolph Billy Duncan played the saxophone, and Earl Forrest was on drums. And later on, they would add different members. And they called themselves the Beale Streeters. And they started performing all through Tennessee and other close by states. And they started to generate a buzz out there. And now one of the places that they would perform at the most was called the Mitchell Hotel. And they get paid $5 a night, but at least at the Mitchell Hotel, they can get a free room and all the chili they can eat. That's where all the musicians will go. Now, also around that time, they ended up meeting Ike Turner, who was a talent scout and producer for Modern Records. And B.B. King ended up signing with them. And B.B. King's first big hit was called 3 O'Clock Blues, which hit #1 on the R&B charts for 5 weeks. But then, B.B. King ended up leaving the band to pursue a solo career. And once he left, that's when Johnny became the leader of the Beale Streeters. And he started singing. Now, the only reason Johnny started singing is because Bobby Blue Bland was supposed to sing a song that this guy named David James Mattis had written. But come to find out, Bobby Blue Bland was illiterate. He couldn't read. Now, David James Mattis was also the program director at the radio station WDIA, and he was the founder of Duke Records. He had started a record label. So once he got in the picture to manage the band, he changed the group from the Bill Streeters to Johnny Ray and the Four Aces. And Johnny Ace changed his name from John Alexander to Johnny Ace because, see, the reason he changed it to Johnny Ace was because he didn't want his parents to be shamed in church by other people because of the type of music he was doing, which was called the devil's music in their eyes. And like I said, when Duke Records owner David James Mattis found out that Bobby Blue Bland couldn't read, he wrote a song, but Bobby Blue Bland couldn't read, so he couldn't do the song. That's when he asked Johnny, did he want to record a song? Because the studio session was already paid for. So, David James Mattis, he asked Johnny that because Johnny was in the corner just messing with this song by Rufus Brown called So Long. And Johnny started singing. He played the piano, started singing, and he just changed the lyrics. He kept the melody of Rufus Brown's song So Long. He just changed the lyrics to it and kept the melody. David James Mattis just loved the way he sung the song, and he signed him to a solo deal contract to his label Duke Records. And in 1952, he released his debut single titled My Song. And they released it and it made some noise locally, but not enough. So that's when David James Mattis partnered with a guy named Don Roby, who owned a record label called Peacock Records, to help push the song, right? Now, see, Don Roby was a mixed race guy. His mother was Jewish and his father was black, but he looked like a white man. And he would use that to his advantage, being light complexion. But Don Roby ran with some ruthless gangsters that ran nightclubs. They was into the gambling, prostitution, and all that. These guys he ran with, they was the backbone of the black entertainment industry known as the Chitlin Circuit. They was known as the nigger mob. Wow, the nigger mob. The Italian mob was running the music industry too, but Don Roby and the black mob gangsters were handling all the black musicians who did the Chitlin Circuit. And many consider him the first African-American record mogul. He had his label 10 years before Berry Gordy did Motown Records. He wasn't the first black record label owner. That was Harry Pace with Black Swan Records in the early 1900s in Harlem, New York. But Don Roby was the first black mogul. He was doing it before the term R&B came into play. It was called race music. But see, Don Roby, he's from Houston, Texas, born in the 5th Ward. He owned some clubs and used to book acts to come and perform at his clubs. And he had signed Big Mama Thornton. Y'all probably know her biggest song, which was Hound Dog. That hit #1 for 7 weeks on the Billboard R&B charts in 1953. Elvis remade it in 1956, and it became even a bigger hit when he did it. But anyway, so Don Roby, he signed Big Mama Thornton. He had the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, Gatemouth Brown, and many others to his label. And he lived that gangster life, though. He was a gangster, always had a gun on him. He didn't mind using violence to get his way and his point across. And he kind of muscled his way of taking over the Duke record label that David James Mattis had. All the artists that David James Mattis had, from Bobby Blue Bland, Johnny Ace, and all of them, Don Roby just muscled his way and cut him out the deal. Took his whole Duke record label, whatever. Well, David James Mattis ended up selling his part to Don Roby. But anyway, look, Little Richard was also once signed to Don Roby back in 1953. Little Richard was in this group called the Temple Toppers. And in his book, he said that him and Don Roby had got into a dispute over money and his contract. And Don Roby slapped Little Richard and kicked him in the stomach. He said he also slapped Little Richard with a hot piece of fish in his face. Wow. And he also was taking Don Roby was taking artists' publishing with a fake name made up and everything. But anyway, so David James Maddox, they partner up with Don Roby. Johnny Ace's single, My Song, got the push it needed, and it ended up hitting #1 on the U.S. Billboard R&B chart and stayed on the charts for 5 months. The women used to go crazy for that song too. It was a well-written, beautiful song in my opinion. Later on, Aretha Franklin, she did a cover of that back on her album in 1968. But anyway, so now with a #1 song under his belt, Johnny started touring with Willie Mae, Big Mama Thornton all through the Chitlin circuit. He was on the road 11 months out of the year. He was doing like 350 shows a year because that was the only way artists would make money back then, because the record label was taking all the money. And Johnny continued to release more singles that hit the charts, like Cross My Heart, which hit #3 on the R&B charts. Please Forgive Me hit #2 on the charts. The Clock hit #1 on the R&B charts. Saving My Love For You hit #2 on the R&B charts. Never Let Me Go hit #9. And he also had a song called Yes Baby with Big Mama Thornton. The song Never Let Me Go was later covered by singer Luther Vandross for his 1993 album. And his version, Luther did a great version of that song, Never Let Me Go. Check it out when y'all get time. But anyway, so Johnny Ace became so popular that in 1954, he was ranked number 16 on the Billboard 1954 disc jockey poll for R&B favorite artists. And he was named the most programmed artist. Like I said earlier, the women just loved him. And he used to love them too. Every time he had a gig in, he would pick up a woman. But they say things started to fall off for him because, Johnny had another side to him. But most of the time, he was always happy. But he could be mean too, like anybody else. He could be mean too. You play with him. He always had a gun on him that he liked showing off to people. And he could be violent at times. They say he liked to shoot the stop signs and road signs while hanging out the window in the car, driving 90 miles per hour. Some people that was close to him say he also used to shoot his gun from his hotel room window. He was obsessed with that gun he had. He was a wild boy. He liked to joke and play around too much. But here's the crazy thing though. Johnny was shy. He was a very shy guy. They say he used to turn his back on the audience when he would sing and play the piano. Wow. And a lot of people that knew him said towards the end of his short career, he started drinking a lot. He started to gain a lot of weight, which made women not find him attractive. Some of his close friends say he wasn't happy at that time, like he was going through depression or something. B.B. King put this statement out that he thought the pressure of being famous was getting to Johnny. There was even a rumor out that he had died in a car accident on Thanksgiving Day, which wasn't true. But on December 25th, 1954, Christmas Day, Johnny Ace was killed. Now, the story goes, on that Christmas Day, Johnny was at the City Auditorium in Houston, Texas, to perform at the Negro Christmas Dance. And who else was on that same show was Big Mama Thornton, Johnny Otis, Bobby Blue Bland, and headliner B.B. King. There was about 3,500 fans at the show. Big Mama Thornton had went on stage and she did her thing. Then Johnny went on and brought the house down. So after they had performed, they were all backstage in the dressing room, just relaxing. Others that were also backstage at that time was Johnny's girlfriend named Olivia Gibbs and her friend named Mary Carter, and a guy named Joe Hammond was also backstage along with Big Mama Thornton. Now, his girlfriend Olivia said Johnny didn't do drugs, but he was a big drinker. And That Christmas night, he had been drinking vodka. They were always drinking vodka back there. And that's when Johnny pulled out his 22 revolver that he had bought at a pawn shop for $50 from another musician or something like that in Florida. They say he really loved that gun and was always showing it off and playing with it. Now, according to Big Mama Thornton, she said he had one bullet in the gun, and he started pointing the gun and squeezing the trigger at everybody in the dressing room. He used to like to hear the gun snap and click. And that's when Big Mama Thornton told him to stop because he might end up shooting somebody. And Johnny told her he only had one bullet in the gun. This is what Big Mama Thornton said when she told the police what happened. And she said that's when she snatched the gun from him. And when she turned the chamber, a bullet fell right into her hand. And she said Johnny told her to give the gun back to him. And she did hand it back to him, but she didn't give him the bullet back. That's when Johnny demanded that she give him the bullet back. And he promised her he wouldn't play around with the gun again. But as soon as she gave him the bullet back, he loaded it back in the gun and started pointing and squeezing the trigger at, he's pointing the gun at his girlfriend, Olivia, Mary Carter, and Joe Hammond. And that's when Joe Hammond told him, since you keep squeezing at everybody else, try it on yourself. So Johnny at this time was sitting by his girlfriend, Olivia Gibbs, with his arm around her. He's hugging her, and he told Joe Hammond that the gun won't fire. And when he put the gun to his head and squeezed the trigger, it fired. Next thing you know, he fell to the floor. And everybody thought they thought Johnny was trying to prank them when he hit the floor because he was always joking and clowning around. But when his girlfriend Olivia raised his head and saw the blood, they knew it was for real. And that's when Big Mama Thornton ran on stage. She ran on stage crying and grabbed the mic in the middle of Johnny Otis's performance and told everybody in the crowd that Johnny Ace had just killed himself and the concert is over. Wow. Now, of course, there's all types of rumors about how he died backstage. The newspaper and the media said he killed himself with a gun while playing Russian roulette. Russian roulette is a game where you load a bullet into one chamber of a revolver, spin the cylinder, then pull the trigger while you pointing the gun at your head to give you a rush if you only hear click. Now, some say it was a murder-suicide. Another rumor was they were saying that the black gangster, Peacock record label mogul, Don Roby, who Johnny Ace was now signed to, had put a hit on him over money and royalties. And it was rumored that Johnny Ace had given notice to Don Roby that he was getting off his record label and was going to sign with another one. Now, a guy named Sax Curry, who used to work for Don Roby in the 1950s, believed that Don Roby had pulled the strings, if not the trigger. Sax Curry's theory was this. He believed that Don Roby persuaded Big Mama Thornton into slipping a bullet into Johnny's gun. In exchange, Don Roby would make her his one superstar for the label. Wow. I mean, what Big Mama Thornton told the cops, she said she asked Johnny to let her see the gun. This is what she said. And he gave her the gun. When she turned the chamber, a 22 bullet fell out in her hand. Johnny told her to put it back in. She put it back in and gave the gun to him. She said Johnny knew about the bullet, but Sax Curry thinks she slipped another bullet in the gun. Wow. Everybody knew Johnny Ace was a heavy drinker and always playing with that gun. Now his girlfriend, Olivia, Johnny Ace's girlfriend, Olivia Gibbs, in her statement to the police, she was right there too. Now her statement, she said she didn't believe that the gun the revolver was loaded. Johnny had been playing with the unloaded gun all day, like always, in her apartment. She didn't think the gun was loaded. Don Roby knew Johnny Ace's popularity too was going down, and his sales were slipping. And Don Roby probably just figured Johnny Ace would be worth more dead than alive. It's kind of like what's still going on in this music industry today, y'all. This is the 50s, early 50s. But hey, Big Mama Thornton and Johnny's girlfriend, Olivia Gibbs, I guess they killed the rumors because they was right there, eyewitness to what happened. And, it's sad. It's sad because it may never be known for sure exactly what happened to him. They ruled his death by an accidental self-inflicted gunshot wound. So, I don't know. At his funeral, 5,000 people showed up. B.B. King and some of the band members were pallbearers. Now, it's crazy because days after his death, Don Roby hurried up and released his song called Pledging My Love, which spent 10 weeks at #1 on the R&B chart and number 17 on the pop charts, making it one of the first R&B songs to enter the pop charts, y'all. Pledging My Love became his biggest hit, and when it crossed over into the pop charts, which was the first time in history a black artist did that song opened the doors for other black artists to hit the pop charts for white America, like Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, the Penguins had the song Earth Angel, and many more. When Pledging My Love started to cross over and climb on the pop charts, and the white teens started buying and requesting the record, look, that's when a lot of the white musicians started doing covers of the song so they can capitalize off it. To be honest, Pledging My Love probably would have hit #1 or gone higher on the pop charts at that time. And many years later, that song Pledging My Love has been covered by a lot of artists: Elvis Presley, Aaron Neville, Diana Ross, and Marvin Gaye, and many more. Look, when Elvis Presley recorded Pledging My Love, it's kind of spooky because it was for his last album titled Moody Blue. That was the last song he recorded before he died from cardiac arrest. Wow. And like I said earlier, Pledging My Love became popular. Everybody was covering it. I remember hearing it in the movie Christine, about that teenage kid in that car. And they also played it in the movie Back to the Future, the 1985 movie Back to the Future. You know what's crazy? After Johnny Ace died, Don Roby signed Johnny Ace's brother named St. Clair Alexander and gave him the name Buddy Ace. Don Roby was trying to capitalize off all the attention Johnny Ace had brought to the company, but the St. Clair Alexander, Johnny Ace's brother, it just didn't work out with Don Roby. I don't know what happened. So what Don Roby did was he signed another singer named James Land, and he gave him the stage name Buddy Ace, telling everybody that he was Johnny Ace's brother. Wow. Now here's the crazy part. The crazy part is this. Buddy Ace, he died of a heart attack at the age of 58 while performing in Waco, Texas, early on Christmas Day, 1994. Wow. He died on Christmas Day too. Now, Johnny Ace's brother, like I said, St. Clair Alexander, he dealt with Don Roby when he tried to sign him, but whatever, they had a falling out. But St. Clair Alexander, he said this about Don Roby. He said Don Roby was sneaky, and he also said that one of the drummers that night that Johnny Ace died had told him that he believes Bobby Blue Bland has something to do with that gun. He slipped a bullet in that chamber or something. Because when Johnny was on stage to perform, he said Bobby Blue Bland stayed in Johnny's dressing room for a while. He was the last one in there. I don't know, but that's what Johnny Ace's brother believes. He said a drummer told him that Bobby Blue Bland had did something to the gun. I don't know. It's just a crazy situation, man. Hey, there's a book though about his life, Johnny Ace's life, by author James M. Salem, titled "The Late Great Johnny Ace and the Transition from R&B to Rock and Roll." Great book. A lot of information if you want to learn a little bit more about Johnny Ace's life. And I would really love to see someone make a movie about this, about Johnny Ace's life. Even though his music career was short lived, his life was short. He died at 25. He still made an impact, though. A movie would be great about his life, man. And his death is the first casualty in the rock and roll era. Because, that whole 50s era, he was like the first one to die tragically. Then, James Dean died at the age of 24, car crash. Then Richie Valens, 17-year-old, Buddy Holly was 22, Big Bopper, they died in the plane crash in 1959. It's crazy, man. Johnny Ace, 25 years old, y'all. Accidentally killed himself. That's what they say. 25 years old. Wow. Rest in peace, Johnny Ace.